All of the groups that Marcos asserted threatened law and order in the Philippines also threatened his stranglehold on the country. The call for democracy went against his plans to stay in power for as long as possible, and by declaring martial law, he now had no democratic limitations to hamper his ambitions. Essentially, he became a dictator along with his wife Imelda, and they enjoyed a quality of life that most Filipinos could not even hope to attain. One of Marcos's first actions after implementing martial law was to target anyone who opposed him. Students, political opponents, journalists, academics, and activists were arrested and dubbed political detainees, allowing Marcos's military regime to hold people indefinitely without needing to charge them or conduct a trial. People were arrested in their homes without warrants or any background information beyond their names on a list. Corruption was rife, and arresting officers could insert any names onto the list without further investigation. Although people were afraid to speak out at the time, countless stories have come out since Marcos was ousted from power. 22-year-old Santiago Matela was playing basketball in the street when soldiers dragged him off in 1977. He endured months of torture while authorities tried to make him confess to being a communist. Lorena Barros was a university teacher who was one of 63 student leaders charged with subversion. She was shot and killed at age 28. Loretta Ann Rosales was arrested and tortured for criticizing the regime. There are countless stories like this, and the Philippines have officially recognized that over 11,000 people were tortured and abused during this period. However, the true number of victims may be much higher. Amnesty International estimates that around 50,000 people were detained under martial law from 1972 to 1975 alone. Some victims were mutilated before their bodies were dumped in public places as a warning to others in a practice that came to be known as salvaging. Officers enforcing martial law participated in various torture methods designed to degrade the victim, including psychological, sexual, and physical torture. High-level government officials were tortured in solitary confinement, and many detainees who were interrogated were subsequently released without charges. However, they were unable to hold anyone to account for their mistreatment. Those were the lucky ones. There were many civilian massacres throughout the regime, even after martial law ended. At least 2 were officially reported. The first was the Palembang massacre in 1974, when a coastal village was razed to the ground by government forces. According to a 2014 report by Minda News, native Muslim men were shot while women and young children were arrested. The report found that an estimated 1,500 males, age 11 to 70, were murdered inside the Malisbong Mosque, while 300 homes were destroyed. A second massacre occurred in 1977 in the village of Bingkul. A 1980 Associated Press report described how uniformed men ordered 12 families out of their homes and made them squat on the ground before opening fire. One adult managed to escape with 3 children, but 42 villagers were killed. Number 4. The media was censored. Marcos essentially wanted to end democracy in the Philippines in favor of kleptocracy, and to do this, he needed to stamp out free speech. He understood the importance of the free press and its role in providing information to citizens. After declaring martial law, one of his first acts was to seize the assets of the major national media outlets. He justified this military takeover of the media by accusing the media of spreading anti-government propaganda, and he sequestered the facilities of newspapers, radio stations, and television studios. He accused the major networks of conspiring with the Communist Party and claimed they were plotting to overthrow the government. He stated they had been used as indispensable instruments in the assassination attempt against the President of the Republic of the Philippines by maligning him. According to reports from the International Press Institute and the Press Foundation of Asia, nearly 10,000 people lost their jobs. Armed soldiers began detaining anyone related to media output, including editors, journalists, and radio and television personnel. The Department of Public Information decreed that news reports had to be of positive national value and prohibited any media outlets from being critical of law enforcement or the military. Any content had to be approved by governmental agencies before being published or aired, including foreign dispatches. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, all Philippine media, including religious publications, were controlled by Marcos. Many foreign journalists were expelled from the Philippines for false reporting, and more still were denied visas altogether. The people of the Philippines were essentially cut off from the rest of the world and each other. They only knew what Marcos wanted to broadcast and the rumors of the torture and dumped mutilated bodies of those who opposed the government. Number 5. It had a negative effect on the Philippine economy. Despite recent claims to the contrary, economic data from the period shows there was a significant decline in living standards during the time of martial law. Poverty levels increased, along with inflation, unemployment, and external debt. Wages decreased for farmers and workers, and environmental issues included massive deforestation that destroyed almost half of the country's forest cover. In the early years of Marcos's regime, the Philippines' gross domestic product grew by a marginal amount. However, by the 1980s, the country was plunged into its worst post-war recession. This economic slump was in no small part due to the massive amount of debt amassed by the Marcos government. And between 1977 and 1982, the external debt of the Philippines rose from $8.2 billion to $24.4 billion. While 40% of the nation survived on less than $2 a day, the Marcoses lived in luxury, amassing a $10 billion fortune while in office. To date, the Philippine Agency, the Presidential Commission on Good Government, has only managed to recover a fraction of what was stolen by the Marcos family. And despite it being common knowledge that Marcos stole international aid money and gold from the central bank, no one has been charged with the crime. Number 6. It officially ended in 1981. After years of increasing opposition, Marcos made Proclamation 2045 in January 1981, officially ending martial law. This move was spurred on by the withdrawal of support from the Catholic Church and Marcos's failing health. However, he retained all his power and kept many decrees made under martial law. Despite officially ending martial law, Marcos kept a firm grip on the country. Elections held under martial law were widely criticized, and many believed the results had been altered to favor Marcos. In 1983, one of Marcos's political rivals, Benigno Aquino, was assassinated by what was thought to be the military after returning from exile. Both international and national pressure mounted, which forced Marcos to call a snap election. His opponent was a coalition of parties led by Benigno's widow, Corazon. Marcos officially won the election, but the result caused such public outcry that it ended in a revolt, and Marcos was ousted. However, the Marcos family was prepared for such an outcome and absconded to Hawaii with around $15 million of jewels, clothes, and freshly printed banknotes. Perhaps the most shocking part of this story is that Marcos's son and namesake is currently the president of the Philippines after being elected in 2022. After 30 years of Philippine governments that have failed to improve living standards, the Marcos family has managed to rewrite history and create a myth that the years of martial law were a golden age in the Philippines. Targeting voters born after Marcos Sr. was deposed, the new presidential campaign seemed to take a page right out of his playbook, spreading so much misinformation that fact-checkers struggled to stem the flow of propaganda. It appears their slick marketing worked wonders, and Marcos Jr., known as Bongbong, won with just over 58% of votes. Time will tell if he will be able to absolve his family of their horrendous actions, but it seems as though he has already charmed the majority of the younger Philippine voters. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you